I have a few different journals, but the one I keep coming back to is this tiny little pocket notebook I made nearly a year ago. The problem is it's full, and there are some other little improvements to be made as well. So we're going to do what the little book is telling me to do, and that is make something, which is going to be the replacement for the little book. You don't have to be good at something to give it a crack. This is going to be the second ever little notebook that I've ever made, so you just got to go for it sometimes, and that's what we're going to do. You're going to see some weird shit because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm sort of just making it up. You'll see what I mean by that a bit later. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and watch me fumble my way through this. It's not instructional at all. To make this journal, I've got some coloured cardstock that I'll use for the cover. You can actually see where I got my original piece from out of that piece of blue, but I am going to use a nice orange here. I don't think it shows up super well on camera, but it kind of reminds me of the Penguin Books orange, which I've always really loved. I've also got some parchment paper here. It's meant to be luxury paper, but I didn't actually buy this. My grandmother gave it to me, which was very kind of her. I think she used it for calligraphy originally. I've got terrible penmanship, but the paper's really nice, so I'm going to use that. But you seriously don't need anything fancy for this. You could so easily use like a cereal box as the cover. In fact, I might do that because I think there's some pretty cool stuff that you could do with that, like nice patterns and colors. And you can also absolutely just use regular printer paper. That's what I used for my original notebook. For the sizing, I'm quartering the A4 paper, and that is twice the size of the final notebook because I'll then fold it in half, which I guess means that it would be an A7 notebook. I think that's right. I don't know. If you know how big it is, let me know, but I think it's an A7 in the end. Even though there's probably enough information in here for you to cobble together something, I'm not doing it the proper way. If you do want proper instructions on how to make a book, I can highly recommend a YouTube channel called Nick the Booksmith. She knows so much about booksmithing. So if you want actual instructions, go there. This video is more just me going on a journey of creating myself a lineage of little notebooks, and this is the second in what I imagine will be a long line of pocket notebooks that I'll make into my future. Now you'll notice in this process there's a lot of repetition, so brace yourself for that, but it's kind of nice when you're going through that process to actually just, get into the zone and just crush through some repetitive things. The good thing is there's only so much of it, and I feel like the number of repetitions you're doing here is small enough that it's still engaging while you're doing it. You never get to that point where you're just sick of it, because by then you're through it all and you're on to the next step. You'll see in a few scenes that I'm really struggling to pick the pages off the mat, and that's because I cut my nails the morning of doing this, and so I just could not get in a purchase on any of the pages, so forgive me for that. I've also got kind of sausage fingers, so they're just not the most dexterous things, but I get there in the end. So once all the pages are done and I can finally pick up a piece of paper, I can cut out the cardstock for the cover, and I'm just making it the same size as all the other bits of paper. And with it all together, it's finally starting to look like something. But now we've got to do another repetitive process, and that's to fold all the pages in half. So to fold them all, I tried to do that magic trick that everyone does on YouTube with some fancy editing, which is literally just a jump cut, but I moved stuff in the background, so it didn't actually work out in the end. So I'm going to have to do it the hard way and just fold all the bits of paper. But again, it's one of those repetitive tasks where there's only 16 bits of paper as well as the cover, so 17 bits, but I mean, it really doesn't take that long. So there's enough repetition to sort of let the mind wander and almost meditate a bit, but it's not so long that you're, twiddling your thumbs and getting bored, and it's just a laborious task. So it's actually quite a therapeutic thing, I found, which is very fitting for the process of making a journal, I think. So now that we've folded them all, it's time to make some holes for the binding to go through. And for this, I make a template using the first page, and I'm just making up the measurements here, just, whatever looks about right to me. And then poking a needle through on that first page, and then I'm going to use that first page as a reference for all the other pages and use that to, make sure that the holes will line up. I was originally just using the needle as is, but I figured out that I can actually put the needle inside my X-Acto blade holder because it's got a cross on the top that I can slot it into. I didn't get footage of that though, but I did get me taking it out. And so if I play that in reverse, I'm putting it in. And so this is a lot more of an ergonomic way to use the needle, I found, because pushing on the end of the needle, I mean, I don't have a thimble, but if you did, that would be good. But if you don't, try using your X-Acto knife holder because it works really well. And then again, it's another repetitious task of just transferring all the hole markings over, and then once you've done that, you can push them all the way through, and you go through all 16 pages as well as the cover, and then you have all your holes made for your binding. I don't know if this happens for other people as well, but I had some other journals that I was very rigid and structured in how I was using them. Almost like there were a set of rules that I had to follow every time I wanted to write in it. And this really bogged me down to the point where I just stopped using a journal altogether. But with this notebook, I don't know why, but it gave me the freedom back of just using it however I wanted to use it and not sticking to the rules. And since I've made this notebook and been using it, I've no longer felt that shackling of sticking to the constraints of my previous journals. So I've been unlocked from that headspace of always sticking to the rules. I think rules and structure and routine are something that I do actually quite enjoy, but I think it kind of depends on the context. For example, I love going for runs and I have a bit of a routine of when I go for runs, but the actual run that I do can change up and be different. And I think with journaling, I've basically been doing the same run every time in my other journals. Whereas this little notebook, I've just been able to go for whatever run that I want and just journal however I want. And that's completely freed me up, and I've fallen back in love with using a journal. I'm not saying that there's a right way and a wrong way to journal, because I think really journaling is about getting your thoughts and feelings onto paper however that comes naturally to you. And for me, originally doing those rules and structures was a way to simplify everything and get in the habit of using a journal. But I think it got to a point where they were then holding me back. And so being freed up again has been so liberating, and it's all thanks to this little pocket journal. So now it's time to choose some thread. There were a bunch of different colors I was going for. The cool thing is you can choose, whatever thread color and whatever cover color you want. So there's endless customization here. You could definitely find some funky threads out there, and like I was saying earlier, some patterned cardboard, or maybe even like a magazine cover or something for the cover, so you can really get colorful and creative with it if you want. I quite like the simplistic design, and I've ended up going with a nice light blue thread, which I think goes well with the orange, but you can do literally whatever you want. The thread that I ended up choosing was the most knotted bit of thread in the whole thread box. Most of them were nicely looped, but not the one that I wanted. And I think there's a metaphor in there somewhere about the things that you want in life not necessarily being the easy one, but it's worth going through the effort of making it work because that's the one you want. Whereas the other options, even though they would have been easier, they're not what I wanted to do. So it was. I'm glad I went through it. I think there's someone more poetic than myself could make that sound a lot nicer, but the knotted thread, there's something in there. So then I can measure out the size of thread that I want, and when I did that, I accidentally put another knot in the end of the thread, which I don't want. So I had to go through and redo. The metaphor continues. And then finally, once all the knots are out and I've got my piece of thread, I can thread the needle, literally first try, no trouble at all, and we can then bind the book. Now, if you've done your whole transfer well, this should be a relatively straightforward task, but with my first book, I tried to just punch all the pages at once, and that did work, and it meant they were all lined up, but where the needle came out on the back side of the cover, was not perfectly in the middle, and so I figured this time I would go individually page by page using a template. But I think the pages at this point aren't perfectly cut square and everything, so I think the holes aren't quite lining up, so I couldn't just put the needle through all at once. So you can see me struggling again with my sausage fingers to get the needle through, but if you wiggle about a bit, it starts working. The other thing is here, I'm using a needle that has a fatter eye where you thread the thing, but I think you can get, I can't remember the name of them, but there's needles where the bit where you put the thread through is the same exact size as the rest of the needle. So it's a bit of a struggle to get the needle through the little hole right at the end where the thread is. If you had any doubt about needing skill for this thing, you can see that I don't possess any finesse or skill at all. You just got to make it work, and that's just how it goes sometimes when you're making something, especially if you're new to it. Like, you can't be good at something straight from the start. Sometimes you just got to get your teeth out and rip the needle through. I don't recommend you do this yourself, but it worked for me, and my book is now got the binding in, so that's all that matters. And there we go. The binding is done, the thread is in, and the needle is off. And now this is another demonstration of my sausage finger skills. Trying to tie this little knot really gave me some grief. It's painful to watch. Actually, you might just want to skip ahead 5 seconds. Bloody hell. Come on, mate. I thought I would be smart, and then I went and got a crochet hook to try and help me on the second knot, but I mean, sausage fingers are sausage fingers, and there's no way around that, really. So, again, quite painful to watch. The other thing is this embroidery thread has 6 strands on it, which doesn't work so well with the crochet needle, and the other thing is there's like no tension on the thread, so it helped, but it's still ugly to watch. Now, you want to make sure when you cut these strands, don't cut them too close to the knot, because on my first notebook, that knot actually came undone, so I had to re-thread it all, which was a bit of a nightmare. But leave a little bit of wiggle room on your knot, is my suggestion. And there we go, we've basically got a complete book, and you could absolutely just leave it here if you wanted. But I am going to tidy up the edges, so I just clamped my ruler onto the front of the book, and this actually put a bit of a mark on the front of the book. So if you do this, put some other paper or something on the cover. I usually do that when I'm clamping it down, but for some reason I didn't this time, and yeah, anyway, there's a bit of a mark, but that's okay. So what you can do here is just, you've got to keep your blade nice and perpendicular and just slowly work your way through all the pages and tidy them up. And you can see that I don't actually do a very good job of tidying them up, but there's another trick up my sleeve, and that is to, again, clamp the book, and this time I do use some paper to protect the cover, and clamp it in between some bits of wood, and then we can sandpaper the top, which will get rid of all the rough bits. I find it really cool how the paper basically just becomes wood again when you clamp it really close. You'd expect paper to just fray and turn all crappy, but when you clamp it like this, it actually sands pretty well. And when you unclamp it, there might be a few frayed little edges, but you can just knock them off with another bit of sandpaper and it comes out looking really nice. So you can see the contrast between a unfinished edge and the nice sanded one. It does make a difference. It might not be worth it to you. I think the front edge definitely is worth it because the pages will be all, splayed out otherwise, but the top and bottom edges probably don't matter so much. On my original notebook, I did have a pencil holder, but it never really held the pen that well. It would always slip out of my pocket, and my pocket in some of my jeans has a hole in it, and so the pencil would slide all the way down my leg, and I'd have to look like a weirdo fishing a pencil out of my shoes. But the actual holder thing as well would always catch on my jeans, and it would tear. So there's a little tear. So I'm not going to put a pencil holder. I'm just going to have my pencil separately in my pocket. And the corners on the front cover also would catch on things and get a bit chewed up. So what I'm planning to do for this one is I'm going to cut a nice 45-degree angle on the corners so that hopefully it doesn't catch on my pockets anymore. And you can see that little mark on the front cover that I was talking about from the ruler. Silly boy. This was so satisfying to do. I ended up using a triangle from the first corner to help me line up the second corner so that they were roughly the same, because I think measuring it I wouldn't have even gotten close, but this way they actually line up pretty well, I think. I'm so excited to have a pocket journal back again because it's so convenient and so inviting to draw in and write in and just use it however I want, and it's always on me, and it's just a fantastic experience. So I really recommend try giving this a go and just see how you like it. I mean, there's no pressure. You don't have to do anything, but I've really enjoyed it. And I think, like I said at the beginning, I think this is going to become a bit of a ritual of when I fill up my current notebook, I will make a new one and have a whole collection of these tiny little notebooks. And I think that would look amazing on a bookshelf, especially with different colored covers and thread. I think it'll look sick. So yeah, I'm super excited to have a new notebook that I can fit in my pocket, and I can't wait.